Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be taking a look at Unit 4, which is ratios, rates, and proportions, and then we're also going to be taking a look at Unit 5, which is percentages. The first thing we want to do is define a ratio. So a ratio is simply a comparison using division. It can be written three ways. It can be written as a fraction, it can be written in words, so 2 to 3, or it can be written with a colon. Order is important when writing a ratio. Whatever order the problem asks, make sure that that's the order that you give your ratio. So some examples, it says simplify the ratio 4 inches in 18 hours. Again, most of the time you see it written as a fraction. So just as we were doing a couple of weeks ago, we would write it as a fraction first in the order that I see it, and then we would simplify it. This one says a basketball player jumps 60 jump shots. She makes 28. What is the ratio of shots made to shots taken? So again, order is important. We want to know how many she made to how many she took altogether. So she made 28, so that's our numerator. Again, that's what's first. And then she took 60, so 60 would be our denominator. So simplifying that, we could divide them both by 4. You get a simplified fraction of 7 over 15. I want you to pause the video for a minute and I want you to try these two on your own. When you're ready, hit play to check your answer. So this one says you've got 6 flight attendants for 200 passengers. So 6 over 200 simplifies to 3 over 100. And then this one was a little tricky. Last week he worked 45, this week he worked 50. The question asks for the increase in hours to the previous week of hours. So how much did he increase going from 45 to 50? Well, he increased by 5 hours, so that would be the first part of our ratio. The previous week was 45, so it would be 5 to 45, which if you divide those both by 5, you get a final simplified ratio of 1 to 9. Now, a rate is simply a ratio between two measurements with different units. You're probably used to rates, so for example, the speed limit that you see, so 25 miles per hour, that's comparing miles to hours. Or saying your car gets 23 miles per gallon, that's comparing miles to gallons. A unit rate is a ratio of two measurements in which the second term is 1. So most time you deal with this when you're shopping. So if you look down on the sticker, there's something called the unit price. This is, for example, the price per ounce of whatever this item is. That's an example of your unit price. So let's look at an example of that. So a lot of times you use unit price to find the better buy of something. When you're calculating the unit price, it's always your money first divided by the amount of whatever that you have. So in this case, we would take $2.49 for this soap and divide it by 7.5 ounces. And so when you divide those two, you're finding the unit price. So rounding to the nearest cent, this soap costs 33 cents per ounce. Take the same soap that's a larger version, we've got $11.48, again money goes first, divided by 127.82 ounces, and the cost per ounce here is approximately rounded to the nearest cent, 9 cents. So again, same soap. It's like every time you take a squirt of this soap, you're paying 33 cents here and you're paying 9 cents here. So although a lot of times people are like, well, I'm not going to pay $11 for soap, think about what you're actually paying per ounce. This would be your better buy. So I want you to pause the video for a minute and try these, and then we'll move on. So the first one, we're going to take the price divided by the amount for the first box, so $2.49 divided by 12, which would be approximately 21 cents per ounce. And then this one, you would do $3.96 divided by 18 ounces. Again, we would make sure we want to divide them in that order. And this one would be approximately 22 cents per ounce. So again, when we're looking for the better buy, in this case, the first one, the $2.49 would be your better buy. The next one's asking for the unit rate for apples per basket. So do make sure that you're doing it in that order. It's apples per basket. So we would do 1,170 divided by the number of baskets. And so in this case, you get 29.25. Typically, we would round to the nearest whole number since we're talking about a real world scenario. So about 29 apples per basket. Now, going along with this, a proportion is a statement or an equation that states that two ratios are equal to each other. So it's essentially stating that these two fractions are equal to each other. If we're reading a proportion in words, we say 1:3 as 4:12. How do we check to see if two ratios form a proportion? The easiest way to go about doing it is using cross multiplication. So when you have two fractions that are equal to each other, that also means that their cross products are equal to each other. So when you multiply 8 times 10, you get 80. And notice in this case, when you do 5 times 16, you also get 80. So since these two check out that they're equal to each other, we would say, yes, these form a proportion. However, on this side, when I do 20 times 16, I get 320. However, the other cross product, which is 28 times 12, you get 336. So if they're not equal to each other, then you would say, no, these do not form a proportion. We can use the same concept to solve proportions. So what we do is we first multiply the two numbers that are diagonal to each other. So in this case, 8 times 15 gives me 120. Now, in order to figure out what this mystery number is, we know that 2 times n has to give me 120. So in order to figure out what that is, we'll do the opposite of multiplication, and we'll do 120 divided by 2, which would give you an answer of 60. So I always tell students, multiply your numbers first, and then always divide by the one that's with the variable or the letter. So pause for a minute and try this one. So we're going to do 9 times 8 first, which is 72, and then we will divide by the one with the variable, which is 12. And so we should get n is equal to 6. When you're solving a proportion word problem, you do want to make sure that you write the first part of the proportion as your first fraction. You want to write the other ratio as a fraction that contains what you're solving for. So you can use a variable. Most people use x or n. And then we're going to use cross multiplication to solve. The one big thing you want to pay attention to is to make sure that your units match up. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. This one says Barbie's average height is 12 inches with a 3.75 inch waist. The average woman is 64 inches tall. So it says if the average woman was proportional, what would her waist be? So as you read it, you're basically going to set up your proportion as you go. So she has a 12-inch height and a 3.75-inch waist. It's important that you label because you want to make sure that this matches up to wherever you put it in your original part of your proportion or your original ratio. So it says 64 inches tall, so it's like where would that go, top or bottom? Since our numerator represented Barbie's height, our numerator on this side will represent the height or how tall a woman is on average. And then we're going to put x or n or whatever the case may be at the bottom. I don't care what variable that you use. So cross multiplying, we would do 64 times 3.75, and then we would divide by 12. And when you do that, we get that the woman would have a 20-inch waist. And so all my ladies watching here, Barbie is just incredibly unrealistic to the average woman. At least I know she is for me. So let's try a couple more like this. This one says in a survey you have 7 out of 10 people would choose chocolate ice cream. So we would say 7 choose chocolate out of 10 total. It says how many would you expect out of 300 to choose chocolate? So in this case, 300 represents my total, so it would go at the bottom. And I'm trying to figure out how many people would choose chocolate. So cross multiplying, I would do 300 times 7, and then I would divide by 12. And so we would get that a total of 210 people would choose chocolate. This one says the adult dosage for a certain medicine is 180 milligrams for every 40 pounds of body weight. At this rate, find the dosage for a man that weighs 175 pounds. So we would start off with our first ratio, so 180 milligrams, 40 pounds. Since we're given the person's weight, we would put that at the bottom to match up with the weight that we put at the bottom down here. And we're going to put X or N or whatever the case may be at the bottom. Again, cross multiply 180 times 175 divided by 40. And we get that the man would need 787.5 milligrams. And then last but not least, a Civic averaged 420 miles on 12 gallons. So 420 miles, 12 gallons. That's our first ratio. It says planning a trip to New York City, which is 2,170 miles. Find out how many gallons he would use. So we'll put 2,170 at the top, and then we'll put X or N at the bottom. Cross multiplying, we would get that he would use 62 gallons of gas. We can also use this for similar figures. So I tell students all the time, I don't care basically how you write your ratio as long as it matches up from one side to the other. So here's what I mean by that. We're trying to figure out what this mystery question mark is. So I would start off, you could do, for example, 6 over question mark. So notice I'm choosing this side first, and then my question mark next, which I'll call X. Now, what I mean by making sure you're choosing the right side, if I choose 6 on this side first, I have to choose that corresponding side on my larger triangle to be my numerator of my new ratio. And then my question mark came second, so then 21 would come second for the second part of my ratio. Cross multiplying, we would get that X is equal to 7 meters. This one, same thing. Again, we're trying to solve for both X and Y, so I want to choose sides that would help me solve. We'll do X first. So I could do 20 over 18. I'm going to go in that same order on this side and do X over 12. Cross multiplying, I would get that X is equal to 13.3 repeating. And then if I'm going to figure out Y, I could do, for example, 24 over 18 for this triangle is equal to Y over 12 for this triangle. And then again, cross multiplying, I would get that Y is equal to 16.